A CRPG is more than just a story-driven game. It is a puzzle that developers challenge us to solve. Creating builds is one of many tools that we have to solve that, and some CRPGs give us more tools via companions to tackle this puzzle. One of those companions is Abelard, the trusty seneschal and the first companion that you meet in Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. Abelard comes pre-built as a warrior that is spec'd into heavy armors, although he doesn't quite meet the strength requirement for that. Abelard is going to be one of your primary companions, and in some cases people's very favourite companion that will travel with you in your journey on the stars. Abelard is a great companion for covering 2 of the 13 skill checks, that in athletics and carouse. Abelard can be built in a number of unique ways. Prior to 1.5, Abelard was just a boring vanilla warrior companion from Imperial World with no reason to keep him around and easily replaced by a mercenary, except for his story contributions, which seem to stop after Act 1. The meme of Abelard introduced me almost entirely stops as soon as you leave Act 1, but with some of the DLCs, they bring that back at a much community request. Abelard can be built in a number of ways. Some people sought to solve this puzzle originally by building Abelard as a Vanguard. Vanguard is actually the bottom 1 archetype in the game, with it seeing its only real benefit from Beacon of Might. Vanguard is meant to be a tanking archetype, but it has no viable way to stack its armor or even to create control through threat and priority targeting. Most of that will come in from exemplar talents, gear, and even a different archetype's abilities. With that in mind, one of the top 1 archetypes was always arch-militant. This had a much better way of not only being more mobile, creating more defense, but also creating more damage. An arch-militant could be built either one-handed or two-handed, and it could even be built when later patches came in for shield use or even dual melee. Currently in the metagame, dual melee is the king. With the 1.5 update, Abelard received an amazing ability called Fleet Combat Training. This is the premier function of the Navy officer, which is Abelard's origin, and has now become the identity of Navy officer. Fleet Combat Training allows you to make follow-up offhand attacks whenever you score a critical with your primary hand or if you parry an attack. This means that a lot of people have tried to build for offhand guns, but unfortunately offhand guns are just not very supported by the game system. Your tier 1 determines what your archetype is capable of, and that is going to be more what you tend to build around. So whilst it is a fun gimmick for lower difficulties, it doesn't see much use on higher difficulties except for being something that people are just trying to go for the aesthetics. Hopefully in the future we'll see more support for this, and it is something that I often push forward the developers. Currently the strongest build for Abelard, you can either have him as a Taunting Scream based warrior arch-militant that uses dual melee with a optional slot in his secondary for either a shield if you take shield mastery, rock swords, or even a two-handed power weapon. Ideally though, you will be going for the 2 melee because there is not much advantage that shields actually offer. A percentage chance to block all incoming damage is nice, but once you learn that the secret to solving Rogue Trader is just stacking extra turns and officer buffs, you no longer really need defense, and you can find that you can reach the defense caps where enemies can no longer damage you without the uses of shields fairly quickly, and then it comes about how efficiently you can clear the battlefield. When building Abelard's tier 1, one of the best abilities that you can pick up on any build is Reckless Strike. This increases your warrior's next attack for both damage, the enemy's parry, and your chance to do armor penetration. It's very useful in early game, and it also causes enemies to get a revenge attack on you that if it is a melee attack and you then parry it, you can then get another offhand attack. So chances are you can potentially hit your enemy 3 times by using this. You'll then want to choose between either going for an ability to control a little bit of aggro with Taunting Scream, or you'll go for something like Breakthrough, which will allow you to then take Shearing Strikes that, now that it's been fixed with rigorous training, you can actually follow up with more attacks, thus increasing your attack economy, thus increasing your damage. The premier feature of Warrior is Daring Breach. What Daring Breach allows you to do is to refresh your AP, generate MP on kill, and have unlimited attacks, which will allow you to kill and very efficiently clear the battlefield. The reason that we opt for Arch-militant as the tier 2 is Assassin is quite weak in the fact that it is linked and limited by the use of Notes on Weakness. Without this item, which is an Act 4 item, Assassin doesn't add much, and it also becomes movement trapped as it loses all MP after attacking. This is an issue that's also felt by Executioner and Vanguard. Whilst Vanguard doesn't offer much in the way of attack, counter-attack, or defense that has any benefit over arch-militant. Executioner, however, does. An executioner that is built for breakthrough with multiple attacks can actually do the highest damage in the game. When you combine it with something like a rock saw, you can then keep increasing your attack by multi-attacking and proccing more dots. Items like inertia boots will also help counteract the fact that you become movement locked, so whilst this can be used for both assassin, vanguard and executioner, chances are you'd only want to give it the executioner because that has the highest possible damage potential, whilst also having incredibly high HP and armor, being able to build and generate that through Medicaid. However, as a non-psyker, overall the best feel that you'll get for Abelard is actually building him as an arch-militant. This will ensure good damage, good defenses, very good mobility, and the best way to use all of his base kit, especially from that of fleet combat training. You'll also be able to do area debuffs to enemies, which will actually boost a lot of your arch-militant talents, so whilst you can build other companions to be better using items for assassin and executioner, you kind of don't find that you'd want to really go into vanguard, which leaves the arch-militant melee spot completely open for Abelard, and it's something very straightforward and reliable that anyone new to the game can use, or even experts coming back will find will never falter for them. Now that we've had a chance to really look at 1.5, we've been able to understand a lot more of the tools we have access to in both terms of talents, items, and the ordering for level up. When we look at Abelard's talents, he is an Imperial world which can not really benefit his playstyle too much. He can use Stronger Together to give 5 toughness to allies, or stuff like No Heresy to get 10% critical hit chance, 10% armor against Xenos type enemies and demonic type enemies. However, chances are you won't get much use out of Better to Die for the Emperor once you know what you're doing, or even Doing My Part, as Better to Die for the Emperor requires you to be under 40% wounds, and Doing My Part is only going to be if no other member in the party has the same archetypes, and Warrior and Arch-militant are quite common archetypes. Chances are you will have overlap in the party, and Ready to Serve is going to be based on their fellowship to get more resolve, and Abelard doesn't exactly have the highest fellowship, so chances are you won't actually take many of his homeworld talents until much later in the game when you're in exemplar levels, so that is something we can hope that they do buff in the future. When looking at warrior talents, we can see that there's quite a lot of options that he has here. There are going to be some talents like Desolation, which is going to be useful to give you agility bonus damage to enemies that do not have allies in adjacent cells, but chances are you're only going to use that again in exemplar levels or if you have a buffer, so this isn't going to be something we're going to prioritize early on. Easy Target's another one that we may or may not pick early on, which is the warrior's critical damage is increased by 10 plus 2 times strength bonus against enemies that are armed with a melee weapon. Talents we will see a lot of use out of is Thick Skin. The warrior gains 1 damage deflection, their parry chance is increased by 25% of the warrior's total armor, and chances are you are going to be sticking to his heavy armor, so you will be getting a lot of extra parry chance from this. Defensive Stance is a talent that I very much like to take for guaranteeing getting through the Chaos Spawn unfair, but it's one that does drop off after that fight, so chances are you might not actually want to take Defensive Stance and to opt for other talents. Hardened Scars is another one that increases Endure every time you get hit. What it does is it stacks 1 extra deflection. Deflection is very useful in the early game, as deflection is flat damage reduction before your armor percentage mitigation, but towards the end game damage numbers are so high that deflection no longer sees value because you can't stack it enough to really get much use out of it. Open Engagement can be useful for get 1 strong melee attack off a turn because you get extra strength bonus coming in, and stuff like Ramming Speed will always be useful if you're stacking Impetus for your charges. There is a lot of gear that you'll use to increase your charges, be the Pneumo boots in Act 1, going into the Void Veteran boots in Act 4, so being able to take talents like Impetus and Ramming Speed is also going to be very helpful. If you're not going for Arch-militant, you'll also want to look into Rigorous Training, so charge does not end your movement, and Shearing Strikes is something that's going to be very vital for Navy Officer's style of play, because being able to get those offhanded attacks along with it is also going to be very useful. So again, more opportunities to have offhand attacks is going to be very strong, and this will stack with Flash actually having a crit causing 2 offhanded attacks. You can stack this with Stalker Boots to get 3 offhanded attacks, but keep in mind if you're not playing Arch-militant with All Out, you will lose those extra MP that you have left over because Rigorous Training does not apply correctly to multiple offhand hits after a slash. Considering Abelard's origin and his homeworld, the best archetype for tier 2 to him is definitely arch-militant. Like I said, Vanguard does not really benefit from extra turns, which is what the meta is here, and stacking extra stats will play into Beacon of Might. It also requires other archetypes and a turn to be able to set up any defense or tanking abilities. So chances are you're going to be wasting turns to try and then hope that enemies attack you to be able to progress the battle. It is just counterintuitive to actually winning the engagement. Whereas Assassin can be quite useful, like I said, it is not online till Act 4 and it requires heavy use of an item. And whilst Executioner is a fantastic option, Heinrichs himself makes a much better breakthrough Executioner, and Cabela will outshine him as a Blade Dancer Executioner, which leaves Arch-militant as the perfect choice. Arch-militant has some fantastic abilities with Reckless Rush, Always Ready, and All Out, playing into talents that will basically give you more MP. It will cause you not to end your movement after attacking, so that way you can just keep going. Dependable is another useful talent that will increase your defense based on your number of stacks versatility. The way versatility works is every different attack type will increase your stacks of versatility. This can be a single melee attack or it can be an area melee attack, so these are two ways to stack it. Other ways you can stack it is you can use offhanded range, but this is much weaker than using 2 melee. So whilst you can change attack types, you don't need to change weapon types. Arch-militant has many useful talents, be it in Dismantle or Distract to start debuffing enemies, or talents that will start increasing your damage they do to enemies through critical versatility, adaptability. Other stuff like Breaking Attack will also be very useful, Contempt for the Weak, and also again in stuff like Focal Point or Preferred Targets. These will all be extra damage modifiers that will come on top of your base damage, drastically increasing what versatility is adding to the build. When we look at the abilities that we're going to focus on, Charge will be the main one for getting you into combat, Endure for keeping yourself up, and then you'll start be choosing between extra attack economy talents like Breakthrough, or if you want to be going for more of Battlefield Control, like I said, Taunting Scream. This will be very useful when going into Arch-militant, to be combining it with stuff like Reckless Rush to increase your movement whilst you're fighting, Wildfire to increase your number of attacks, which will be useful for when you take the upgrade to be able to mixing in area attacks, as well as Kick, which will give you even more attack economy. When you then get extra items like Void Veteran Boots later, every melee kill will generate a charge, which you can then abuse with either Rock Swords going in, or just using Fleet Combat Training with your secondary offhand attack. As I said earlier in the video, now that we've had more time to solve 1.5, I've had more time to refine the builds. The 1.5 Abelard build video is still perfectly correct, but there are some variations that I've now come to find. Previously I talked about defensive stance being used early for the Chaos Spawn encounter, but with some better play and use from the player, you can survive with just taking thick skin. This allows you to get into hardened scars earlier, which then allows you to get into ramming speed instead of taking hardened scars at level 8. This will then lead open Impetus, and then you can choose to take Reckless Fury. Reckless Fury is very good early game in forcing Reckless Strike to critical to get more use out of your Fleet Combat Training, but it will drop off more into the later game. However, it drops off much later than say Defensive Stance does. When it comes to going into the tier 2, I had previously built for shields as you could get 2 deflection, but now that we have some of the injections such as Vicious Solution, we don't really need to go into shields because Vicious Solution will give 1 deflection whereas the shield will only give 2 deflections. When it comes to fighting Aurora with the correct buffs from an Officer Companion, you find that Aurora won't even be able to damage you. So I've actually opted more to go for Melee Weapon Specialist and Dual Weapon Specialist by level 24 rather than building into shields and just completely dropping shields. Now that we've had the Power Armor update, by level 34 you kind of want to go into Power Armor Efficiency, and then you open up to get It Will Not Die for the Act 3 fights, and then Power Weapon Specialist as you move into Act 4. When it comes to gear, I've updated the gear to consider. Now, this isn't the end game or what to pick up straight away, but it's stuff that you're probably going to want to look at to pick up. Of course, the Guardian Crown is going to be a fantastic helm option for him, as well as Tactical Genius, and Retina Analyzer only if you're still sticking with the shield stuff. But when it comes to using the power armors, we do have 3 options that are all pretty good. I prefer the Adherent of Mankind, but the Invincible Onslaught Armor and Sanguine Judgment are also very good options. The 2 best items to put onto Abelard is going to be the Malpain Shroud and Invigorating Resolve, because it allows infinite stacking of temp HP, which you don't need Vanguard for. It's another reason why Vanguard isn't too useful, along with Fleet Combat Training. When it comes to accessories, it's going to be more down to what you really want to put into there. You can put some of the litanies in there, or you can pick in some other items that will give a small boost here and there, like Bead of Might, or something like the Hellbrook Horn Trophy, which you can use to convert his defenses to more damage. What is going to be important is using stuff like Pneumo Boots, or even the Death World Boots that will stop enemies dodging, and eventually going towards Void Veteran Boots, then maybe even Enforcer's Light Boots, or if you're using swords, then Fencing Boots. When it comes to weapon sets, I'd previously, like I said, gone for shields, but towards the end game, I'm now using more power axes and offhand hammers, or sometimes just 2 axes. The strongest items are going to be Carnage and Tearing Vengeance, so which options you build for are going to be a little bit more up to you. When you want to look at other variants, like I said, on the sheet that I am showing now, we do have a Vanguard version if you did want to build into that, so you can go to the sheet and follow along there. You can go with an offhand foe hammer build, which again, if you click the sheet in the description, you can go through there, and you also have options for, say, Assassin or even Executioner. If you want to go to the 1.5 build video that I did previously, I will explain every talent in there, and if you ever get lost, I do have full talent guides here as well as ability guides on the spreadsheet, so you don't need to go anywhere else other than this spreadsheet resource. As certain item choices can actually impact your story, I try not to give one-for-one progression with my guides and sort of more explain what you should aim for. When it comes to his armor, you do want sort of the heaviest and the best defensive options you have, because the actual armor defensive property is far more important than the deflection, but you will pick up the Adherent of Mankind in Act 3, which is why we opt to go for Power Arm Efficient earlier, and you can stick with this for the rest of the game or change it to something else that suits your playstyle. The Guardian Crown is something that you will get in Act 2 through Idara's questline, and this is going to be something that can carry through all of the game, but one of the items from the store that you are going to want to prioritize is Invigorating Resolve, as I explained earlier, and getting Malpain Shroud from one of the colony events. Now, if you want to know exactly where they are, these locations are on the spreadsheet, but I try not to, as I said, tell you one for one, because I want you to experience the game yourself, even if you are looking up for the story. As you can see here, I'm actually using Peculiar Trinket, which isn't something that I recommended earlier, and I've still got one of the hidden items from Act 3, which is the Litany of Exhaustion. These are not mandatory, but items to consider will be the Adaptive Gloves, because you're going to want to get as much weapon skill as possible to stop enemies from parrying your attacks, and that way you can focus on actually also getting criticals from excess. And in, like I said, secondary slots can be any kind of two-handy like, be it a rock saw or, say, a power weapon. Overall, this should give you a really good guide to follow for Abelard, and if you want more specific breakdowns on each individual talent, then I would suggest that you check out the previous 1.5 video I did, or if you want to see how to play him, then come along to any live stream and you'll see him as part of my retinue, and you'll be able to ask questions there. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for stopping by, and I hope you're enjoying these little updates for 2026.